Texan. So I have been actually living on the East Coast since January. So most of the speaking that I do has been on the East Coast, and weirdly enough, a lot on the West Coast. So it's nice to be back home. Normally I get up here and I preface my speeches with, I apologize for how many times I'm going to say y'all, how many Texanisms you're going to hear from me, how many words I'm going to put together to make one, because that's what Texans do. So I don't have to apologize for that. I don't have to preface that because I'm with my people, and it's so nice to be home. And if you're not a native Texan and you have no idea what any of that means, well, bless your heart. So sorry. I actually lived in Houston when I was in first grade, so we were driving through, and I would come back here often because it's the only beach in Texas, so we do so many vacations here. So driving in, I was like, oh, memories, childhood memories. So with this speech, it's so funny. Actually, when Shelby asked me to come speak, it was originally to kind of tell my personal testimony, and I've kind of been bored with telling my testimony. So because I've done it so many times. So this time I was like, okay, I want to figure out how to make this a little bit more interesting, make it a little bit more interactive. And then it kind of dawned on me that there are actually parts of my testimony that I don't speak on intentionally out of like fear. So I was like, let's make an entire speaking tour out of something I'm terrified to talk about. So that's where this idea came from. And it started out as just this school, and now I'm doing a 6-day speaking tour on this topic that I'm terrified to talk about. So yeah, we're gonna dive right in. So we are all aware that pro-abortion activists claim that abortion empowers women to make choices about their own body and their own fertility, right? But the findings of many studies show that, and prove, rather than feeling empowered by their decision to have an abortion, they're actually pressured into a decision that doesn't ultimately align with what they want or desire. And what's even more troubling, from that pressure stems the psychological issues that arise after abortion, and that can actually be very devastating on the mental health and well-being of the mother. So that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to talk a little bit about that pressure and coercion, and then I'm also going to go over some of the psychological risk factors and metrics that have been proven through post-abortion studies in women. So two of my favorite kind of mic drop quotes that I really like to start out with. In an increasingly health-conscious society, why does abortion lack a warning label? So we've all sat in front of the TV and have heard commercials about the latest depression medicine, the latest heart pressure or heart disease medication that's coming out. And they go about and list like 75 different side effects that go along with this medication. And then at the end of that, they're like, oh, by the way, you can also die. And then you sit there and you're like, I never want to have that medicine. Why would I ever want to do that to myself and put myself through those risks? Why can't the same be said about abortion? And why do we keep quiet about those same side effects and ultimately the same outcome that could happen? And given that over 60 million abortions have been performed since 1973, which was what?
Roe v. Wade.
There we go. The number of women harmed by abortion is considerable and growing. So I hope after this presentation that you can see abortion does in fact harm women. It is not a safe procedure. It is not an easy procedure. It comes with many, many costs. Abortion is never free. It comes with many costs to the mother and obviously to the child. And another one of my favorite quotes is abortion makes a ton of promises that it cannot keep. So, like I said at the beginning, I kind of wanted to take a different approach to this presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, when Sarah was giving my introduction, she mentioned that I worked in the health and fitness industry for 7 years. So I was a personal trainer, I worked in physical therapy. So I looked at, when I was in college, I looked at case study after case study I wrote case studies, and I minored in psychology, so I did a ton of risk assessments, and used my experience and my knowledge to determine with the clients that I was working with, what were the best practices for this patient or this client, and what maybe could have been avoided to avoid some of the injuries or risks that that client was dealing with at the time. So I'm all about risk assessments and case studies. So I'm going to introduce you to 2 women today that are post-abortive, and we are going to take a look at these women through the kind of glass of a case study. So think about what you might already know about post-abortion syndrome, or about maybe the reactions that you've heard of already with post-abortive women, and just kind of start thinking of those as we dive into both of these case studies. Each of these names have been changed, so they're not the real name of the person. So let's take a look at Alyssa. Alyssa was, again, both of these women are post-abortive, so just keep that in mind too. So Alyssa was not married. She was a college student, working 2 jobs. She had a family history of anxiety and depression, personal history of anxiety. Boyfriend wanted the pregnancy. She was raised in a Christian home. She wanted the pregnancy but felt attached immediately to the child. She experienced her older sister becoming a teen mom. Boyfriend changed his mind and told her to abort, so she terminated the pregnancy. So again, you don't have to answer this yet. I'm going to ask for answers in just a little bit, but start thinking about the red flags that you already see. What reactions do you think are going to come from this for the things that you already see from her already? What do you think she's experiencing prior to the abortion? What do you think she's going to experience after, based on these metrics so far? You don't have to answer that yet. Just wait. And Jessica, she was a mother of 2, married for over 10 years. She was trying to get pregnant. She was excited for the pregnancy. Found at the 16-week ultrasound that the baby had abnormalities and would not live a normal life. To her, abortion was the best answer, and husband said he would support her in whatever she chose. Again, what are some red flags that you might already be seeing from Jessica? What experiences do you think that she's going to endure after this? Start brainstorming with those. Guys, I'm telling you, like, as soon as I stepped off the plane yesterday, I started sneezing, and I was like, yep, I'm back. I know. So, sorry, my voice is scratchy. I thought Virginia was bad. So, a lot of the material that I'm about to discuss is going to come from this textbook. Now, before you give me grief about the date, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but here's what I do want you to know. Again, the material that we discuss is coming from this textbook. Look in the upper right-hand corner over there. So there's the NAF logo. Okay, so that's from the National Abortion Federation. This textbook is written by abortion providers for abortion providers. Okay, they have to know the material that we're about to discuss in order to perform the abortions. Okay? Chapter 3 in this textbook has actually been used as a reference on the clinical policy guidelines of NAF. So it has been used regardless of the date. They do keep using the material that we will be discussing through this. So this textbook states, women whose psychological functioning was marginal or poor before an abortion experience a higher incidence of negative repercussions after. Self-explanatory on that, right? However, negative reactions are not experienced exclusively by those with psychological disorders. So basically, what this is saying is women who didn't have problems, horrible word, sorry, to start with, also can end up with problems after their abortion. So, big one, let's rest on this for a second. So again, I think we can conclude the first point, that if someone is not stable to begin with, then obviously more problems are going to arise after the abortion, correct? But now, what abortion supporters are proving by this second point is that even the women that are fine to start with will suffer. They all suffer. How is this empowering? How is this healthcare? They're all going to suffer, is what this textbook is concluding. The next few slides, I'm going to talk about reactions that have been studied and proven within this textbook. So these are reactions that are proven, and then all of the category or all of the characterizations that fall under these. These are reactions for post-abortive, okay? So this is what happened after. The first one I want to discuss is depression. So crying frequently, suicidal thoughts, performing poorly at work and school, losing interest in enjoyable activities, and feeling worthless. When I was doing my research on this, I had a binder of like all of this stuff, and I was literally like, check, check, check. I fell under all of these for the alley before recovery. I was like, yep. All of those. So, next one, guilt and unresolved grief, characterized by engaging in self-punishing behaviors such as substance abuse and abusive relationships, interpreting any misfortune, illness, or accident as signs of God's punishment, abortion PTSD, characterized by nightmares about babies, blocking out the experience, avoiding triggering memories. If you don't believe that abortion PTSD is a thing, ask me. I will tell you my experience. I won't go into that now, but I was diagnosed with it. So I can tell you it's real. Been there. Not fun. Promise. So the definition of guilt is the fact of having committed a specified or implied offense or crime. So let's take that one step further and look at that word implied. So implied could basically mean going without saying, correct? So for some women that do end up going through with an abortion, especially those coerced, the implied sense of wrongdoing is where the guilt stems from. That's where the negative thoughts come from, because we're told to be quiet, because we're told to not talk about it. So again, taking a look a little bit at the psychology behind it, because I love doing that, guilt says, I did something wrong. The what was wrong, okay? Grief says, I am wrong. I am a bad person. And that's where those self-condemning thoughts come from. Now, what about unresolved grief? Engaging in thoughts and behaviors that perpetuate a strong emotional investment in the pregnancy, or that prevent the redirection of emotional energy into moving forward with life. Or that prevent the redirection of emotional energy into moving forward with life. So they can't get past the trauma. What do you think that does to someone after 5, 10, 25 years? It's not fun. That's what. Shame and regret, characterized by relentless thoughts of being a bad person, engaging in self-destructive behaviors, fear of anyone finding out about the abortion, and dwelling on the negative consequences attributed to the abortion. So, what do you notice about the symptoms of shame and regret compared to guilt and grief? Do you see any similarities, any differences? You can shout this one out if you want. Any similarities or differences in there? Well, according to the clinician's guide, the symptoms of shame and regret appear to be more internalized, right? And the grief is more outward projections, right? So it is coming from every direction for post-abortive women. Again, how is this empowering? How does that make healthcare? How does this help a woman, right? So this textbook, again, goes and lists 14 risk factors for mental health problems after the abortion. So what it's doing is identifying subgroups of women who are at increased risk for abortion, for problems after their abortion. So these are the risk factors prior. If you're dealing with these prior, you're gonna have those negative reactions after. So those include low self-efficacy, low self-esteem, existing mental illness or disorder, significant ambivalence about the decision, lack of emotional support and receiving criticism from significant people, perceived coercion, intense guilt and shame before the abortion, belief that the abortion is murder, fetal abnormality or other medical indications, past childhood sexual abuse. Typical coping style is repressing thoughts or denial. That was me, still is. Unresolved past losses and perception of abortion as a loss. Experiencing social stigma and anti-abortion demonstrators on the day of the abortion, and commitment to the pregnancy. So I don't know about you, but I don't know one preteen, teenage, young woman facing an unplanned pregnancy or not that doesn't deal with low self-efficacy and low self-esteem and existing mental illness like anxiety and depression. So more women than not are going to fall into this category or into any of these. So they're all still. And this was from that textbook from abortion providers. So again, they had to write this and study this and prove it. Now this is used, I think, more often. May have, again, an AF logo, still there, but same risk factors included in this, again, written for abortion providers by abortion providers. Now, there's more risk factors that we have to consider. Now there's 18 that they're studying and proving for women. So, with this, researchers from both sides of the issue now have come together and said that there are subgroups, again, of women who are at increased risk for mental health problems after an abortion. So, and they have these studies to back them up. So researchers on pro-choice side and pro-life side have said, yes, if you fall into these categories, because of all the studies that back this up, you're going to deal with those negative reactions. So women who are coerced or pressured, at least 13 studies prove that. Women who are ambivalent about the abortion decision, at least 21 studies prove this. Women who are committed or attached to the pregnancy or who desire to carry the child to term, at least 9 studies. Advanced stage of pregnancy from the 2009 textbook. Lack of emotional support and receiving criticism from significant people, at least 21 studies. Perceived need for secrecy is a risk factor from the 2009 textbook. Adolescence is a risk factor. Oh, that's from Planned Parenthood's fact sheet that they don't use. Having strong religious convictions against abortion or believing that one is acting against one's own values. At least 10 studies back this. So there's a significant amount of research from both sides of the issue proving these subgroups that the women will fall into to have these negative reactions after their abortion. Okay, now that we've gone through the risk factors and talked about the reactions, let's backtrack a little bit. And now you get to participate and discuss what you think these women might be feeling or participating in. So again, remember, Alyssa was not married, she was a college student working 2 jobs, family history of anxiety and depression, personal history of anxiety, boyfriend wanted the pregnancy, raised in a Christian home, she wanted the pregnancy. Boyfriend changed his mind and told her to terminate, so she did. New factors to consider. Boyfriend convinced her he was dying from cancer and it wasn't fair to raise a child like that. Told her if she had the abortion, she could finish school and he would pay for her graduate studies. Told her they would have kids later at a better time. Felt ashamed to be pregnant outside of marriage since her sister was a teen mom. Fearful of social stigmas. And Jessica, remember, married for over 10 years, already a mother of 2. Excited for the pregnancy, she was trying to get pregnant, found out 16-week ultrasound the baby had abnormalities, felt abortion was the best answer, husband supported her. New factors to consider. Terminated the pregnancy 1 day before the 21st week because of Texas's 20-week ban. Went back to work immediately started trying to conceive, got pregnant 3 months later, and delivered a healthy baby. Okay? Considering those, What predisposing behaviors did both of these cases share or differ? What subgroups do you think that they would fall into? And based on this assessment, what after effects are you going to be looking for? Now you get to answer. So what do you think these women are going to go through, and what subgroups do you think that they would fall into? Please don't raise your hand, because I did not become a teacher. Shout them out.
They have different social support parameters, I guess you'd say, right? In the first case, she didn't really seem to have much of a social support, and in the second case, she had her husband, I think, being pretty supportive. Also, they were in different periods in their lives, right? Second one was already experienced mother, and I guess she knew a little more about what she wanted out of life. And the first one, that seemed to be new waters. Yeah.
What else? What kind of negative reactions do you think these women are going to experience? Not going to be very good. Nothing? What do you think these women are going to go through? Based on, do you think based on their circumstances they regret? Or do you think there was any grief involved?
I think it'd be a different kind of grief for the one who's already a mother. She might be reminded, I think, a little more often because she has other children. I think maybe in the first case it's a little more likely that I think Alyssa would experience like a oppression, I think, of the experience.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. So, understand this a little bit more. Prenatal bonding. Several authors have demonstrated that the degree of bonding that is established during pregnancy is predictive of the degree of emotional distress and trauma symptoms that are experienced after their abortion. So this is a really big statement, okay? Women are wired in a very unique way. I'm waiting for the men to be like aggressively nodding, like, amen. You can say that we're in Texas. So as women, our brains are wired to nurture, okay? As hormones change during pregnancy, the body is preparing for motherhood physically, mentally, and emotionally at the moment of conception, right? As soon as conception, our hormones go haywire. Sorry, men. Might explain a lot. When a woman starts considering an abortion, she then has to deny what the body is naturally trying to do. This is when the denial begins, okay? Denial of the child's life, that he or she is truly an innocent and dependent human. And then this denial continues after the abortion. Denial of the grief because she doesn't want to tell herself that a life was actually lost. And then post-abortive women will bury these thoughts with whatever they can. An abortion short circuits what our bodies were destined to do. Mother. Now, side note, fun fact, and I can't speak on this, but I can at least tell you this fun fact. Men are the protectors, right? The the strong support. It's been proven that the second a man finds out his partner is pregnant for the first time, his testosterone reaches a level that it never has before and never will again, even for the second time that his partner got pregnant. So that hormone that increases his protectiveness, his support, when he has to deny what the body is naturally doing and his partner decides to have the abortion, he's going to spiral as well. And that's where those hormones also come into play for him. Now, I can tell you stories because I know several post-abortive men, but I'm also not going to speak on that issue. But they kind of go through that same thing of what the body is naturally trying to do, and then he has to deny that cycle as well. So there are issues for men too. So I went through a recovery group with 8 other women, led by 3 women. I've mentored other post-abortive women through the recovery process. I've been mentored by post-abortive women. and I'm very fortunate to know some very prominent post-abortive leaders. We all agree that we have this lasting attachment to know the child that we lost. It's just innate in us as women to know that child. That's the prenatal bonding. So let's see if your post-abortion reactions were true. So for Alyssa, after terminating the pregnancy, she had frequent panic attacks, felt worthless, frequent flashbacks to the day of the abortion, fears of never being able to have children, turned to substance abuse and abusive relationships. She suppressed emotions related to the abortion. She was emotional at the sight of babies and young children. Studies and work deteriorated. Rejection from parents after they found out, and she had frequent angry outbursts. Is that what you were thinking was going to happen? I'm Ms. Mancy. That's exactly what I was thinking. Jessica had a sonogram picture of terminated baby on the fridge, but took it down when new baby was born. Has angry outbursts and drinks heavily when kids aren't around. Was that what you were thinking too?
Yes.
So, let's meet Alyssa.
Spoiler.
Oh no, can we hear it? Hold on. How do we turn up? Can we turn up the
I don't know how it works. Oh,
Pretend like you didn't see it yet.
that's weird. The music earlier was working.
Okay, okay.
It's very soft.
About a week later, it was almost like
Hey.
my feelings had snapped. And we were ready. We planned everything yesterday. After the spoiler alert,
Yeah.
Alyssa's Allie. Also, my name's Allison. But we started getting excited, and I just grew more in love for this child as each day went on. About a week later, it was almost like my feelings didn't matter anymore, and lies started to develop. I didn't know that they were lies at the time. But this man just kept reassuring me that he loved me, and these lies started coming up and just convincing me that maybe this wasn't the right time to have kids, and that he loved me, so maybe we'll have kids when it's a better time. And he developed lies about dying from cancer and that it wouldn't be fair to raise a child that way. And I believed him because I was, again, so terrified of being alone and being single. And I just wanted that relationship. So I believed what he was saying and believed that, okay, maybe, yeah, this isn't the right time to have a baby. So we made an appointment to terminate the life inside of me that I had already grown to love and already very protective of. And I just remember waking up that. So this is actually my story. I fell victim to the manipulation, the internal manipulation of out of fear of being single, the manipulation of a boyfriend and some really well thought out lies, and the manipulation of the abortion industry. Yes, he convinced me that he was dying from cancer. He also convinced me while I was pregnant that his dad passed away and that it just wasn't the right time now to have a child. He actually said the words, and I remember them to this day. This was in 2011. I remember to this day. If you go through with the abortion, we will stay together. If you keep the baby, I cannot promise you I will stick around. Wow. Talk about manipulation, and talk about why I run for the hills at any ultimatum now. That's why. Now, here's the real ugly truth that I don't share much of, because it exposes just that, the truth of exactly what we were just talking about. And I'm about to be really raw with you for a second. For 5 years after my abortion, I turned to alcohol as a Band-Aid. In other interviews, I've actually spoken about how I would determine the success of my nights based on how many times I gave out my phone number and how many free drinks I got from the bar. I used men in relationships as if for revenge. I stayed in abusive relationships because I felt that no one else could love me for what I had done. I convinced myself that God would never love me because even my parents rejected me when they found out. I kept it a secret, and so did my family, out of shame. I had frequent flashbacks that induced insane panic attacks, which is where the PTSD came into play. I could tell you the color of the walls on the abortion facility and the color of the nurses' scrubs. The flashbacks were so vivid. Every description of depression that we talked about earlier, I had it. And then some. Suicidal. My schoolwork deteriorated. I actually became a workaholic because I wanted to make up for what I had done by being the absolute best of the best in my field. I became very successful in fitness. I was very comfortable, but never felt good enough. I strived for more, pushing myself to breaking point after breaking point after breaking point after breaking point after breaking point. I felt as if I was successful and my paycheck reflected that, it would cover up what I was actually hiding. I was a very, very angry person. Very angry. Any high stress situation or any situation really, anger and rage were my first emotions, my first reactions. I was so cold-hearted. I would brag about how I don't feel, or I'm like a guy when it comes to emotions. Now I cry when I see a puppy cross the street, so there's obviously a happy ending. There is a happy ending, and we'll talk about that happy ending in just a little bit, but I want to discuss Jessica. So how many of you think Jessica was worse off than me? Be nice. I don't know. But what I do know is that she was hurting, and she never went through a proper grieving time before she conceived. She has frequent angry outbursts towards her husband and children still, and she didn't do that before because, we were best friends. She was very easygoing, very lighthearted, and that's why we were so close, because she calmed my crazy. I needed someone to calm my crazy. She drinks alcohol now more than she did prior to the abortion. She took the memorial down of her daughter when the new baby came. Prior to having her third child, she had open conversations with her other children about their sister that died. Now she won't let her other kids talk about her. Sad. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit. Talk about the other side of the issue, some other heavy stuff. Coerced abortion. So this is a very heavily debated topic within the life movement. A study published recently in the Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons found that nearly 3/4, almost 74% of women with a history of abortion surveyed admitted that they experienced subtle forms of pressure to terminate their pregnancies. What are some other words that you can think of when you hear the word coerced? Shut 'em up. What are other words that you think of?
Shanghai.
Forced.
Forced, yeah. What else?
Pressured.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So words like manipulate, persuade, forced. Actually, the definition of coerced is to persuade an unwilling person to do something by using force or threats. Doesn't this sound like something the pro-choice side of the argument would want to combat? Because women make their own decisions, right? They can't be forced, right? Women empowerment. How many people have told you that a woman cannot be forced or manipulated into having an abortion? You've been told that before? I have. I cannot tell you how many people have actually looked me in the eyes and said, you had your own 2 legs to walk out of the facility that day. I was actually told that during an interview. The interview did not end well, and that interview never got used. Not pleasant. So I want to discuss another definition of coerce. to compel by force, intimidation, or authority, especially without regard for individual desires, or to dominate or control, especially by exploiting fears or anxieties. So I don't care what side of the issue that you're on for abortion. I think we can agree that any selfish use of power to compel a vulnerable woman into an abortion is just by any sense morally wrong. Can we conclude that at least? That it's regardless of what side you're on, to compel a vulnerable woman into doing something that she doesn't ultimately want, where's the morality in that?
It's abuse.
Exactly. So we demonstrate the use of coercion to identify the process that partners, family members, or others within the woman's immediate community selfishly pressure her to go through with an abortion that she doesn't ultimately want. That's how we describe coercion. So I'm going to explore this a little bit different, or a little bit more, using an article written in the National Review by Colin LaCroix. He's the Associate General Counsel, basically attorney on staff at Human Coalition. So, also a very good friend of mine, former colleague. I was interviewed for his research, so I'm allowed to use his findings. I just thought I'd give him credit for it. So in this article, he points out this quote: "Some within the abortion industry acknowledge that the problem of coerced abortion. Abortion supporters downplay the scope of the problem by focusing almost exclusively on women who face pressure not to abort, and abortion proponents are known to allude to force and coercion in the context of abortion restrictions and their effects." Bold statement, big statement, let it sink in. So coercion can be defined and portrayed in three distinct ways. First, it's underlying or unspoken. This aim is to benefit the person that is doing the pressuring, not so much for the pregnant woman, for example, a family member that wants to cover up the sexual misconduct, or partner that is trying to avoid responsibilities such as childcare, or any of his other responsibilities. Second is the use of power or authority, such as the partner threatening to break off the relationship, or a school threatening to expel rather than help. And the third is the pressure or manipulation overrides the mom's inner desires, forcing her to do something she does not ultimately want. This is where coercion differs from logical reasoning meant to change a woman's preference. It's aiming to make her act despite her initial reactions to the pregnancy. Does that make sense? So let's revisit my story briefly. My boyfriend at the time was an authority figure where I was working. He was over 10 years older than me. I was one of multiple women that he was seeing, unknown to me. And he used many tools of manipulation, such as ultimatum of if I aborted, we would stay together, and he would take on the burden of my graduate school loans. If I chose to keep the baby, we would break up. What category of coercion do you think he would fall into, or that situation would fall into?
Power.
Mm-hmm.
Since he was, I guess you were subordinate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm kind of making room for all of it, really.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
because you said that you had wanted,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
there wasn't sure.
So Jessica's coercion. This is where I said at the beginning, it's very hard for me to talk about Jessica's situation. So with her, I was 2 months out of post-abortive recovery. And to this day, I really think this was God's way of being like, you think you're ready, let's see. I was with her the day that she went to the appointment and decided that the abortion was what she wanted. I sat with her in the room. I sat with her in the waiting room and looked at all the other women around me, bawling my eyes out, literally wanting to take every single one of them and like run out the door. Yes, thank you. I was with her in the room when they pulled up her daughter on the sonogram. 21 weeks. She was perfect. She was whole. She was a baby. She wasn't moving because of the abnormalities that they found. But I sat and I listened to the nurse in the room, medical professional, that did not give her one recommendation of a doctor that specializes in what her daughter will be facing. Did not give her one recommendation of counseling so that her family can endure what her daughter will be facing later. The only recommendations that were given to Jessica on this day were what's going to happen to her when she takes the abortion pill, what time to come in for her appointment, and what she'll be feeling when she takes the pill. That was it. And then the lawful description that they're supposed to read about the reactions of abortion and everything like that. That was it. What kind of coercion do you think that is? By the medical community. I was crying.
Unspoken.
Probably all of them, again. So what can be done? There is not a clear policy solution to this problem. Some states have introduced or passed bills that require abortionists to screen for coercion, or to post signs referring clients to resources that address coercion. Is that being done? Probably not. But it is not clear that those laws would have a meaningful effect. Think of it this way. The same type of manipulation that tells a woman to abort can be the same type of coercion to convince her she's not being coerced. But what are we going to do? Ultimately, abortion providers are so committed to denying that this situation exists. The abortionist that I sat in front of before my procedure for my pre-screening asked me questions but answered them on his own. This is exactly how it happened. Where's my pen? I had a pen. Again, I had a pen. Sat there, he looked at me, looked at the boyfriend. So why are you here today? Why do you want to do this? Because I'm assuming it's just not the right time, nodded his head. Yes. Okay. Are you ready? That was it. I went into the room. So as we can see, well, abortionists maintain the belief that they are still helping the woman. The problem of coercion will still be a problem as long as abortion remains legal and acceptable. As we can see, abortion pits a mother's natural instinct to protect her child against the desires and interests of those she loves or cares for. It becomes a double-edged sword for her. And until she has someone standing in the gap for her and assuring her, she will more than likely choose the happiness and desires of those she loves than focus on the value of the life inside of her. It's a thing, coercion. Okay, we're getting ready to land the plane, I promise. I just want to review some facts that will help drive all of this home. There are short-term, long-term, and psychological risks associated with abortion, okay? Short-term risks include bleeding or hemorrhage. This occurs in up to 1% of first trimester abortions. Guttmacher, Planned Parenthood's right hand, estimated 1.1 million abortions were in the first trimester. So 1% of that is almost 11,000 women who suffered excessive blood loss. 11,000. And up to 2.5 in the second trimester. This can be caused by cervical lacerations, uterine perforation, loss of tone in uterine musculature, and incomplete abortions. Personally, I suffer from scar tissue buildup. That's very painful. Very, very painful. And I have now been told that it will be harder for implantation and for me to carry to term because of that. Just one of the many reminders that I get to endure. There's a ton on the daily. You can ask me about them, and I will tell you a laundry list of them. I'm going to try and make the next point without crying. Still have yet to do that. I had a surgical abortion done where I was put under anesthesia. I later found out when I started going to a pro-life gynecologist that when you're under anesthesia and you choose to do the abortion that way, the abortionist thinks in his or her mind that that gives him kind of free reign to be a little bit more rough than what he would have been if you were awake. Again, surgical abortion. I was put under anesthesia without anyone knowing. 2 people knew. My parents didn't know. I could have easily been one of those 11,000 to have excessive blood loss. Easily. Knowing what I know now. And knowing that I have scar tissue buildup, meaning he took it upon himself to be a little rough. Minors are more susceptible to infections such as pelvic inflammatory disease and endometritis. This is actually on Planned Parenthood's fact sheets that they still don't use. Long-term risks include increased risk of preterm birth. Currently, over 130 published articles show a statistically significant association between induced abortion and preterm birth weight. So, in another study in 2012, 2 or more abortions increased the risk of preterm birth before 28 weeks by 69%. 3 or more abortions increased the risk of delivering before 28 weeks by 178%. There is an increased risk of placenta previa. One study found an increased risk of 30%. And an increased risk of breast cancer. I know there's going to be so many up in arms about the breast cancer thing. I'm not here to talk about abortion and breast cancer. And anything that you want to know, I would get from this. So if you really want to talk about it, grab one of those. Anything I would tell you is from that anyway. Mm-hmm. Psychological risks, my favorite thing to talk about. 81% of women experienced a higher risk of mental health issues following an abortion. 81%. From another study, 34% increased risk of anxiety after an abortion, 37% increased risk of depression, 110% risk of increased alcohol use, and 155% increased risk of suicide. Another study has shown the suicide mortality rate was 3.1 times higher among women who aborted compared to those who delivered. Ask me why I do what I do. Well, this is one reason. These are not my sonogram pictures. I don't have any. I wish I did. 2 weeks before I took, or 2 weeks after I took over the role for international duties at Students for Life, I was contacted by a girl in London who was facing an unplanned pregnancy. She had her abortion scheduled. I talked to her all day long over social media and WhatsApp. I actually left work early because my phone died because I was talking about her so much, and I told my boss, I was like, I can't. I'm going home. I need to talk to her. We talked all day. Told her my story, told her what I went through, and then she blocked me. Didn't talk to me. I didn't hear from her. This was mid-February. Completely blocked me. I kept messaging her, like, relentlessly, hoping she would just see my messages. And mid-March, it was St. Patrick's Day. I'm driving to go have dinner with my friends, and I get a message from this girl. St. Patrick's Day, it was 5 weeks later. That says, because of you, I'm 10 weeks along. I decided to keep it. I got a message earlier that she's in labor. Today.
Aww.
Yeah. No, I cried this morning. I'm going to be crying all day. So if I'm unable to have a child of my own, that's one of my rewards, that I get to see this and do this for a living.
How much longer?
So recovery was 12 weeks, and it was the hardest 12 weeks that I've ever been through. It made me relive that day and
brought up a lot of pain that I didn't know I even had in me still. Pain towards people that I didn't even know that I was angry towards. Pain towards the situation that I didn't even know that I had. And I stuck it out.
So there was a happy ending.
Yeah.
I get to do this now, and I'm going up right until that time. So I'm going to cut off a little early. I'm going to leave it open for some Q&A. If you have any questions that you want to ask me, I'll stick around for a little bit. If you have any private questions that you want to talk to me about, more than happy to answer. I'm obviously an open book. I don't mind talking about the gritty details of anything. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you got to learn a little bit. There really wasn't that much that I was going to share after that, other than keep being bold on your campus because you can save at least 2 lives. Unfortunately, this is what abortion does. So hopefully you were able to take something away, but feel free to ask me some questions or anything else. Thank y'all.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, thanks for coming, guys.